Hey neighbors, this is Alyssa. And before we get into this fantastic episode with writer, poet, and event producer Khalisa Rae, I'd love to personally invite you to her upcoming event, the Griot and Grey Owl Writers Conference, taking place November 7th through 9, and offer you an exclusive discount code on your ticket. I'll let you hear more about the conference and Khalisa Rae's words during the episode, but I am really excited to share that I will be hosting a live conversation featuring local writers there as well. So whether you'd like to attend just that session or the entire weekend of cultural turn up, as Khalisa says, visit the show notes to get an exclusive discount code for Durham Artist Archive listeners. Enjoy the podcast, and I hope to see you there. Hi, my name is Alyssa Cuffy Anoaha, and you are listening to the Durham Artist Archive. This is where we tell the story of Durham through the eyes of artists. Let's get into it. Hi, welcome back to the Durham Artist Archive. This is Alyssa, and I'm super excited to have Khalisa Rae with me today. She is an award-winning artist, writer, educator, event curator, and so many things. And so, Khalisa Rae, I will let you introduce yourself. Tell me a little bit more about your creative practices, your background, and how you got into them.
Yeah, so as you said, I kind of am a multi-hyphenate now, but have always been, since I was a little girl, a artist, a performing artist. So my mom has this joke. We were talking how we both are from the Midwest offline. And my mom has this joke that, little me in Gary, Indiana, I was like a little Jackson 5 kid where I would stand on the bed and I would sing all of the Disney songs, and she would teach us the harmonies to I Can Show You the World and Magic Carpet Ride. And so that's been just ingrained in me since I was little. I come from a family of artists. Like it's just been natural. Like my aunts sing. I've always loved to sing. My mom said I woke up my kindergarten class with a sing-along, and I've just been like always ready for the show, right? Was in musical theater, sang in the gospel choir, and that carried over to college. But really, it's like very, I would say, divine the way that I came to know that writing was the thing that I wanted to do. So I actually used to write fiction stories when I was 7. Literally just talked to my mom a couple of days ago because my birthday was in August and was like, send me the stories. And we don't know where they are, but we know that I've been writing since I was 7 because I remember the stories. And so I've been writing since I was a little girl. But every time I'm interviewed, I tell people that I never wanted to be a writer. I always thought that my path was the stage, acting, performance, singing, Hollywood. Because that's what my sister, that's her profession. So she's a movie producer and director bi-coastally in LA and New York. And I thought that that was my path too. But literally, I will talk about more of it. But I was in college. I transferred on a whim to A&T. And the first couple weeks, the director of the creative writing department had us spit cold turkey a poem just like from memory. And I was like pissing bricks and so nervous, but I did the poem, one of the only poems that I knew like solid enough to like impress somebody, And she heard me do that and was like, she's a blind poet, renowned poet. So I was like really, really trying to impress her. And she was like, I don't know what you have planned after graduation, but that's what you need to do for the rest of your life. And literally, I was stunned, but also I've never had a feeling where I was like, say less exactly what you told me to do, I'm about to do.
Yeah.
So on graduation day, I was doing the business plan for my poetry women's nonprofit in Greensboro, North Carolina. So that's kind of how that catapulted my start.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is so cool. I just heard so many things I could pull on because I also was a theater kid. I don't think I realized that you started in performing arts, but I was curious about that because I know that you are the theater and literature director at the NC Arts Council now. So I was curious how that tied through.
Yeah.
But I will go to, you grew up in Gary, Indiana.
I did.
So is North Carolina A&T how you got to North Carolina?
No, it's not at all. So, like I said, I actually transferred schools. And before I got to A&T, I had been to 2 North Carolina universities. So my freshman year, I wanted to be a film writer and a actress. So I thought I was going to study film and theater. And I got a rude awakening my senior year when I got mixed up with a really toxic, abusive boyfriend in high school. And literally the day of our senior play, we had this big explosive falling out. And I missed half of the deadlines for my college applications, or they were like really halfway done. And so I was in a pickle. I think everything is divine. So at the time, I thought that literally that was like the lowest point of my life. He had like embarrassed me at our cast party. He had embarrassed me in front of my mom. He had broken up with me, found I was cheating. It was a whole like Real Housewives teenage situation. And I thought that not getting into all these schools and like he was the cause and my life was ending. And I was so upset at the time. But what I didn't know was that was going to be exactly where the universe wanted me to be. We were talking, you and I, about how we're Midwest kids that randomly came to North Carolina with 0 family. And I think the universe knew that I was destined to have like no's from literally all of the acting film schools that I wanted to get into. They all said no, and only state schools said yes. And I got into UNC Wilmington, and I said yes because my parents had heard that that was like the next best thing if you don't get into the Hollywood schools or like the LA schools like my sister did. She went to USC. If you don't get in, at the time, Screen Gems was booming. And, you know, Dawson's Creek and One Tree Hill. And so I thought that that was like, at the time, I thought that that was my life path. And that was like the blessing out of the bad, was that I got into this second best, like they called it the Hollywood of the South. And so that was in 2004 that I came to UNC Wilmington. The thing that I didn't know was the history of the 1898 race massacre. And that's what my first book is about, Ghost in a Black Girl's Throat. I immediately within the first year got very depressed and had to like figure out what was going on in the South because I knew very little about the South. And so that was like my first introduction was like coming to UNC Wilmington and thinking it was going to be all like beach parties and rainbows and then learning about like the underbelly of like Southern racism and just like the turmoil that has happened that was like hidden. So that was my first experience with North Carolina. And then like years later, I decided to transfer to A&T.
Okay.
Yeah.
I actually want to dig more into that book, Ghost in a Black Girl's Throat, because when I read the synopsis, I felt like I really resonated with it as someone moving to the South or who moved to the South. And in my first week, I remember my parents drove me down. It was a 17-hour drive. We packed everything up in my parents' truck. We unloaded, and they're like, good luck. They left. My first week, I'm like, all right, I'm going to find furniture. I'm working from home. I need a desk. And I go to an Office Max. I find the desk I want. They don't have it in stock. So they say, okay, they have it in stock at this other store. It's on Falls on Noose Road. And I was like, that sounds like a trap. I'm not going over there.
Absolutely. Yep.
Like, what are these street names? You know, and just continually having little weird experiences like that. Learning who some of these street names are named after. And
the monuments.
And that's what your synopsis kind of brought up for me, and it took me back to those moments. So I'd love to hear more about I mean, you shared some of it, but just more about what inspired the book and
Absolutely.
all of
Okay,
that.
so before I tell you about what inspired the book, I have to tell you about the rest of my college experience.
Mm-hmm.
So fast forward 2004, I'm there for a couple of years. I start failing my classes, and I have been up until this point like a straight A student. Literally, it wasn't until, like I said, senior year where things started falling off, and then first year of college, thought I was going to be straight A because that's what I always was, very
Mm-hmm.
ambitious, very great student. So something started changing in me mentally and spiritually, and I just couldn't figure out why. So I think the synopsis of the book was always resting in me. Literally, the book doesn't get published for another 10 years. Like, just think about that. The book doesn't get published for another 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
And so the birth of the book was sitting in me for a whole decade. And imagine like how much maturation and change that I had from
Mm-hmm.
like, I went to school younger than most of my peers. So I left Indiana, they packed me up and did the same thing that you did at
Mm-hmm.
18. So just imagine like the difference in coming to the South from Chicago at 18. And
Mm-hmm.
I have a poem about this. I came during a hurricane.
Mm-hmm.
And so I came when like literally the city was like, the windows were blowing off buildings. And I was like, what is this? So I get there and I'm like, the storm passes and I'm like, okay, this is going to be like this really fun experience. And then I don't learn until a year or something, 2 years in, when I'm failing out of my classes and like drunk every weekend, that like this place literally is haunted. Like they have
Mm-hmm.
ghost tours in Wilmington.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, that's not funny because it's like y'all took a collection of Black folks and threw their bodies in the river and chained them to basements, and y'all thought that the place wasn't going to be haunted.
Yeah.
So that idea had been sitting in me. I flunked out of UNC Wilmington. And I have these racist spats with my teachers. There's protests. There's all these things happening. It's like a lot of unrest in the early 2000s. And so I tell my parents, yo, I got to get out of here. If there's any way for me to like exchange or do a UNC thing, I want to go. So I found out there is. You can go to any UNC school you want to as a visiting student. So I did that at UNCG. That's how I discovered Greensboro, North Carolina. And I was like, oh, wow, night and day, like the Greensboro Four and the sit-ins and the marches. This is beautiful. This is amazing. And so I didn't think anything of making that my home until when I returned, they were like, yeah, you got to come home. You can't stay there. You'd have to be like a full degree seeking student. And so my grades were so bad that I talked to my homeboy and he was like, my dad works at A&T. It's a Black school. What if we just pack up all your stuff because you're depressed in Wilmington? And what if we just go to A&T? And so literally, like, I didn't even print out a full transcript. I had a couple of sheets of my, like, this is like a running joke in my family. I printed out a couple sheets of my transcript. I didn't print out the ones that say I had failed. Literally gave it to them, and they were like, "You." And the admissions counselor got distracted, and he was just like, "Whatever, you're admitted." And I was like, "Okay." And I was like, "That's how I know God's real," because he he didn't ask for the other pages that said I had failed. I was like, "Okay, thank you, God." So now we're talking about I'm a non-traditional student in the early 2000s, and I graduate with my degree, and then I get my master's, and then I write Ghost in a Black Girl's Throat. And so I had changed so much as a person, and I was ready to tell the story. I think me and you were talking before about like, I don't think that you can read certain things or write certain stories until you are spiritually, mentally, and developmentally ready to do so. So it took 10 years of me getting my spirit and soul ready, or life getting it ready, for me to then get my master's. And that even just makes me want to cry, the fact that I literally thought I would never do higher education because of what happened to me and all those like failing out. But then I go on to get 2 other degrees after. And so that is like, I'm so proud to say that I like got my master's. So Ghost in a Black Girl's Throat came from all of that. But also I was super lucky to study with Ada Limon, who is our former U.S. Poet Laureate, and Claudia Rankin, who were my thesis professors. And they're the people that once again gave me permission to write this book. They heard my story. I told them all of this, and I was writing poems about all of this to just decompress from everything that had happened to me. And then I came out to them and was like, and also, I think I'm queer. I'm also a survivor of trauma. And they were like, Khalisa, if you don't write this book. So I told them, okay, I'll make that my thesis project. And so to graduate, you have to write a book. And that's what I did.
Wow. What a powerful story in so many aspects, because I think the biggest theme that's coming up for me is having the patience for the story to stew and mature, and allowing it the time it needs to like build until you're ready to share it, but also the perseverance you had throughout that time, because you could have just said, forget this, I'm gonna go do whatever else, you know?
Yeah.
You could have said, forget this master's, like they didn't want me anyways.
Yeah.
There's so many stories that we want to tell ourselves sometimes that would like make us quit. But you were like, you know, I'm just gonna keep trying. And then you did it, and you did it again, right? I think that's so powerful.
Thank you.
So that name, Ghost in a Black Girl's Throat, though, where does that specifically come from?
Okay, so in all of my life, there have been, you just said it, that there was like, I could have given up, but I didn't. But I think that the universe, our ancestors sent me people that reminded me that giving up was not an option. So the book was called Something Different when I did my master's thesis. It was called Outside the Canon, and then I called it something else. I called it like Wade in the Water or something. It was something very random. And so I then get accepted into a New York residency. At this time, I had started another nonprofit. I started a queer bookstore and literary space in Wilmington. So I moved back to Wilmington and start this queer literary space with these two other folks. They all come with me to my residency. It was really beautiful. I will never forget, I'm in this like famous library in New York, and one of the prompts with Safia Ahilio, who I like was such a stan of, because they were a slam poet that turned into like a literary published genius. So I was like, okay, that's my life. Because I had done slam my whole life. They were like, okay, take a poem that you've written before. So I was like, okay, got that. And they were like, I want you to pick a random book in the library in New York. Just open the book to whatever page and pick a couple of words that stick out to you in the book, and then pick a couple of words in your poem that stick out to you. And I tell this story and people think that I'm lying, but I literally was sitting on the floor and the words from the book were like girl, throat, body, and then there was like southern dirt. And then I was like, interesting. So then the words from my other poem that we had to like splice together was ghost. And I was like, okay. So then I tell Safia, and Safia's like, if you don't make that the title of your book that you came to work on, I'm gonna jack you up. And so I was like, okay, I'll splice those words together and make it something. And it took a lot of workshopping with them to like figure out what combination of words, like ghost, throat, body, south, whatever.
Yeah.
And so the thing that really hit the nail on the head was I started getting really sick during that time. And I had throat issues. And so that was and then come to find out now throat cancer runs in our family. And so I didn't know what was going on with me. I kept feeling like my throat was closing. And that was just the sign that it needed to be called Ghost in a Black Girl's Throat. Because in talking to Claudia and Zafia and all these mentors, they were like, there seems to be something inside of you that you've been like told not to talk about, or like stuck inside of you that you need to get out. And so I was like, oh, okay, the title needs to be Ghost in a Black Girl's Throat.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Even down to the parallel of having throat cancer run in your family, but you also being a writer and like a spoken word poet sometimes, and that being an issue at the same time. That's wild. It's really fascinating.
Yeah.
And so I'm also hearing that you were moving around a lot.
I was moving around a lot.
So what ended up bringing you to Durham specifically?
I started a nonprofit in Greensboro on graduation day. That nonprofit lost funding, but it had impacted folks so much with
Mhm.
us like going around and doing poetry in classes, at schools, at
Mhm.
museums. I've been doing spoken word my whole life. I've been doing spoken word since I was like 19. I had been doing it so long that I had built a name for myself,
Mhm.
group had built a name for itself. And so these other individuals in Wilmington reached out to me the same day that my husband lost his job and he got a job in Wilmington. God has just
Mm.
ordained my steps. That's a whole nother podcast for another day. But so this random girl that graduated from UNCW's English department was like, hey, so I heard about you. Would you be interested in starting this like queer inclusive space?
Mhm.
And I was like, well, first of all, how you know I'm queer? How you know? Like, it was just like life had just like dropped that in my lap.
Mhm.
So that's why I transplanted from Greensboro to Wilmington
Mhm.
because that was just ordained. And then our business, the hurricane came and I got married. And so we decided that the weather was too fickle. And then Wilmington, after a couple of years, constantly just makes me feel really down. And so I was like, I once again feel like I'm suffocating here, like I did when I was in college. I told my husband that, and he was like, where would you want to go? And we knew that wherever we moved, that we had a community with our mentor, Dasan, and we knew
Mhm. Mhm.
wherever we were, we'd be safe with him.
Mhm.
And so I was like, how do you feel about moving to Durham? Because Dasan's there. And so that's what we did. We moved here because our brother was here and we were tired of moving around and we felt like this was like the final place to settle. Yeah.
So when was that? How long or how recently was that?
Yeah. So we got married in 2018 and then we moved in 2019 during the pandemic,
Okay.
a little bit before the pandemic hit.
Mhm.
Yeah.
What was that experience for you? Seeing Durham just before the pandemic and
hmm
experiencing that and now still being here.
Yeah, I was really excited to talk to you about that because I saw one of the things you wanted to know was how has Durham changed? And I feel like I have a unique perspective about that
Mhm.
because I literally moved here. Like we had been, like I said, for 10 years or more doing spoken word. And my husband had been a part of the Bull City Slam team
Mm.
since we started dating in 2010. He
Mhm.
was at A&T. He met Dasan and all of the like pillars in the North Carolina poetry community in 2009. And so that's how we met, like our brother and our mentor. So Durham was no stranger to us. We
Yeah.
literally so I've lived in several different North Carolina cities. I got my master's in Charlotte. And wherever I was, we would always travel back to Durham. So Durham has always been our nucleus, our center.
Mhm.
So we've seen it change. And yes, living here is different than just like being a part of the artist community. But, we have seen Durham over more than a decade, specifically the like Black artist community. And it was
Mhm.
so weird. But again, ordained, ordained, ordained. We were supposed to move during the pandemic because had we not moved during the pandemic and seen the shift in the creativity was really like stifled during that time. The communities were rifted. I think a lot of people like felt like they didn't really have soul ties and connections in the way that fed them. Specifically, like creatives were really calling out for that. I heard from a lot of people because, of course, we started a conference because of
Yes.
the pandemic and the issue
Mhm.
with the artist community. And so we surveyed a lot of people, and they were like, well, I'm going to be honest with you, during the pandemic, yes, it got worse, but like even before the pandemic, we really didn't see where we fit in. Like, where were there spaces where we could go and just be us? And so I think the community has changed a lot, like because of that, I've seen that ebb and flow. And for the not so good too. Like gentrification is rampant in
Mhm.
Durham. And so we've seen that too. It's like when we first moved here during the pandemic, I think we got inklings of that. But especially with my husband being in tech, we've
Mhm.
seen this wave of more commerce comes more gentrification and people being moved out of their community to make way for what they call more economic development, which has just really impacted Black and Brown folks. And so, yeah, we've seen it really shift, but I think it was meant for us to see the change so that we could come up with solutions to start to heal the community with the tools that we have. So the tools that we have is creativity and writing, because we believe that that is a life changer and a soul healer. And so that's kind of how we birthed Griot and Grey Owl, because we were like, people are hurting. These are the tools that we were given. This is what we're going to use to start to heal communities.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect segue to dig more into Griot and Grey Owl, because it sounds like you saw a gap and you created this event to fill that gap or meet that gap. But I'm really curious about... First, I'd love to hear more about what you were hearing in those initial interviews that you were doing.
Yeah, so some of the interviews were not just done with Bull City folks. So because social media was all the craze in 2019 to 2021, during that time, my book was also coming out. So a lot was going on in my life, and I started this business. My book was coming out, was teaching, doing all this stuff. I felt like I had community. Like, I felt like, you couldn't tell me that the community that Dashawn was curating was not like the best in the world. And so like, I felt like I was on cloud nine. But then there was a juxtaposition of how I felt. And then I would go talk to people online, and they were starving. They were community starved. And so me and Eric, my husband, started these 24-hour marathon, like summit-a-thons. We started a newsletter. We kept trying to solve the problem with all these different random things. So we would do that. We would do monthly, quarterly calls with writers. We started all these little groups. But all of it just felt really transactional sometimes, or just like empty. And so I went through this really hard period, because I got this rude awakening thinking that the community that I was fostering online was the same as it is in person. And that was not the case. I experienced just like a lot of naysayers and negativity, in trying to cultivate these communities when we were talking to people. So that became the first bit of research. Where are people's heads at right now? There are some people that are like, nothing's going to change. Poetry doesn't matter. It doesn't do anything. Like, so you had those naysayers. We were collecting that data. Then we were collecting the data of people being like, well, we want that, and we believe there's hope, but we just don't see it. And so that's where it was from. The people that said that they want it, but they just don't see it, is where we birthed this vision, because we said, the one thing that we know is, number one, the pandemic is going to be temporary. Number two, we know that we have seen it at its max, not just in Durham, but we're fortunate to have traveled the U.S. doing Poetry Slam, have seen the power of that community, but also the Southern Fried Regional Slam community that feels like one giant family reunion with a ton of folks that just like love up on you. And so we were like, okay, that's where we need to start, is the people that were like, just show us that it's out there and we'll follow you. And so that's kind of like the information that we gathered. And then the last thing we gathered was that people felt very divided, if you will, that like the traditional artist community, when I say traditional, I mean like people that have chosen to make artistry their career, or people that have trained with a degree, or people that have gotten classically, some type of classical training in their art form or institution, versus what I call like the people's artist, just like an artist living in the world doing your thing with no formal training. There was a huge rift between those two types of people. And it felt very like the haves and the have-nots when we were talking to people, the like accessible and the non-accessible things. And so that was also information that we gathered and tried to like solve or help when we do Gray on Gray Owls. Like, how can we bridge the gap between the people that have all the knowledge, have all the money, have all the fundings, have all the opportunities, versus the people that are just like in their home painting, could be a world-renowned painter, but don't know how to like make anything happen past that. So we gathered a lot of information, but that was just like the three most common pieces that we needed to like really catapult this idea that we had. So
that's interesting that you also saw the rift between those two types of creatives in the
Yeah.
writing community.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I definitely see that in the visual arts community, and
Mm.
that's something that I'm trying to address in one of my upcoming projects. I'm researching for a pop-up art gallery, and the goal is to create space for those independent artists, if you will, like
Yes.
the not classically trained
Yeah.
artists who didn't go to art school
Yeah.
but still love it and want to pursue it. Because it's hard to get into galleries,
It is.
you know, and
Yeah.
there's only so much space on the walls that
Yes.
are currently available.
Yeah.
So how do we make it more accessible?
Right.
And in some of the research I've heard so far, and just from having these types of conversations,
Mhm.
is there used to be more spaces,
Yeah.
but some of them have closed.
Yep.
So even if it is just temporary, how can I recreate that? And so
Right.
I think you're doing that same thing with Griot and Grey Owl of we're going to have this weekend long experience.
Yeah.
You're going to get access to all of these creatives from across the South
Mm-hmm.
and experience that community. And because it's not just Durham or not just North Carolina based, it's all Southern writers.
Yeah.
I think that's a cool opportunity for people to go back to their own community and still find those same
Yes.
writers.
That was our original tagline
Mhm.
was take the seeds you find in the Durham soil and
Mhm.
go plant it where you are. That's
Mhm.
literally why we started it, was so that people could get rejuvenated and inspired by the beauty of Durham and the Triangle.
Mhm.
And hopefully they take that back to their like desert, if you will, because a lot of people claim that they lived in cities where it's basically like an artistic desert for Black people.
Mhm.
And so we were hoping that they could take that seed, plant it, fertilize it, grow,
Yeah.
and then come back every year with like a new spirit.
Mhm.
So,
Yes.
yeah.
And to make a callback, one of your words earlier was Southern Dirt.
Yeah.
And I actually wrote that down because your theme for this year is Carolina Gold, mining Black stories from Appalachia to the Gullah Coast.
Yeah.
And so when I think of mining, you know, Southern Dirt came up for me there.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to ask about that theme, like why that and why is that important for you this year?
So again, ordained. So we were thinking the theme was going to be something totally different.
Mhm.
And then we had a team meeting and we were just talking about the turmoil in the world. And this was actually before all of the like governmental shutdown stuff. But this was earlier in the year. And we were like, yo, things are really jacked up right now. What could we do to help invigorate Griot and Grey Owl's mission? And so we were like, well, we could do like this Kickstarter and this campaign, but what could we call the campaign? And I was like, well, I've been thinking about like harnessing something or like mining something. And then literally one of our team members was like, yo, you know what would be fire if we called it gold something?
Mhm.
And so we were like, well, we're trying to make this year about the Carolinas because we told ourselves that it was supposed to be scaled down, but of course that never happens. And so we were going to only focus on the Carolinas. And we were like, okay, put those two together. If you're mining for gold in the Carolinas, call it Carolina Gold.
Yes.
And so we called it Carolina Goals. And then the way that we got the Appalachia and the Gullah was I was commissioned to do a poem that studies my ancestry on one side. The side that I don't know a lot about is my paternal side. I found out that we actually are Creole people that owned an island off Louisiana, and we have like Creole Gullah roots. And then, like me and you were talking about, my family on my maternal side is originally from Mississippi and the Gulf area. And so when I was thinking about like what I want to personally, like selfishly, know more about, because we were talking about how, you know, I don't know a lot about my southern roots. I have no family here. And so some of this theme is selfishly like me trying to reclaim like what I believe is like somewhere deep in my veins and my roots. But then in sharing this theme with my team, they were like, that would be so cool if we're focused on the Carolinas. Why not do the mountains to the coast? And so we didn't, you know, for marketing, like mountain to the coast wasn't catchy. So we were like, okay, what about the Appalachia to the Gullah? And we were like, oh my God, that's such a cool idea. There's so much wealth of food and talent and history and culture and stories that spanned coast to coast, that we were like, we're going to be here. We could literally do that all year is study, the stories of the people of the Appalachia to the Gullah. So yeah, I'm so excited about this theme.
I love that. I'm really excited for it too. And I'm actually also curious about what's been your experience organizing an event like this?
Oh, Jesus.
Because it's big.
Yeah, it is. It's not for the faint of heart, child. Not for the faint of heart. It is, I've been doing events, as you can tell from my story, since I was young. I, started clubs when I was my first year in college. I started a club. And so I've always been a starter, doer, clubber, bring people together person. I think that that's one of my callings. What I think artists don't have oftentimes is the ability to organize with structure, which is ironically, as a neurodivergent person, but also someone that believes that that's the part that we neglect to give artists business skills. And so that's literally why when we started Griot and Gray Out, I was like, if nothing else, we gonna have craft, we gonna have community, we gonna have culture, but we also gonna have career. Because they just don't. Literally, I was in college and that was one of our symposiums, was how to teach artists to be good business people, curators, organizers, because y'all don't have that skill. I'm just learning that you have to, that's the hardest thing about putting on something of this scale and size, is those things have to come first. And for a lot of us, it doesn't come natural. And I'm like, I don't know. So I'm learning to rest on community, to rest on the elders that know better than I do, to form a really good team that has the skills that I lack. And that's how we do this thing, is with an amazing team of people and leaders and trailblazers. So, yeah.
That's good. And this is the second one? The third one. The third one.
Yes.
So have there been any major lessons that have come up for you over these 3 years?
In curating, it's actually not about you. It's about the people that you set out to serve. And I think reminding us, we have to remind ourselves of that every single year, is we created this not for us, but we have an audience that is crying out for something, and to always go back to the why. The why did we start this? The original data we collected. Why did people say they wanted this thing? And so that's been the biggest takeaway, is the user experience. My husband's in tech and he's like, that's the biggest thing. It's user experience is when somebody comes to your event, or if you think about customer service in restaurant, they want to come and they want to feel loved on and seen and heard and special. And they want to leave with something that they didn't know when they first came in. And so that's what we keep trying to cultivate, but something that we continuously try to remind ourselves of, is our why, So that's what I've been learning over the years, that it's okay for also our why to change, and also for the baby that you've been birthing to not be perfect, that you don't have to wait for the baby to be perfect in order for you to release the baby. You can just get it into the world, and it's okay to grow in the midst of community, as long as you're growing. And so those are some things, some nuggets of wisdom that I've been learning as we curate this.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm thinking about, so for myself, I also love curating and for myself, I like the curating of events and spaces more for the storytelling part. So also the message that people get to take away from the experience. And I did an event in 2023, and I wore all black just because I like to wear black. And I just didn't think anything of it. But a friend of mine, she wrote about the event, and one of her observations was Alyssa wore all black, and it represented her putting herself in the background and not being in a nice way, like not being the main
Okay.
character of the show. It's about the art and the artists and all of that.
Yes.
And I was like, I just like wearing black.
I guess.
Yeah, sure. But I also think about like when you're on stage, tech wears black, right? Because
Yes.
it's about the actors.
Yes.
When you're producing events, unless you are actively speaking and this specific moment is
Yeah.
about you, the rest of the event is not about me, right?
Yep.
It is about the user or the visitor or the client, or like whoever you want to call the
Yes.
person
Yes.
experiencing it. To make sure that they come and they have a good experience. I think of it as being the duck on top of the water, and like my legs are moving really fast, but you can't see all that.
Yeah.
It looks like we're smooth sailing.
Yeah, you're a servant of the people. And I think that's something that I also like. My mom is in public service. A lot of my family is in public service. And I think I tell a lot of people, like, before you get into this, remember that oftentimes service is a very thankless job. But that's why you got to remember your why, because if you let the why be about praise, validation, being seen, you will always end up disappointed because that isn't your why, and you have expectations that don't meet your why. And so if you think about like, I am publicly serving other people so that they can get what they need, and by proxy I get what I need. If you look at it like that, we're just talking about Zelda, and that's one of her principles, her and Alexis Pauline Gump's, about this reciprocation model of letting your ego go and knowing that like actually if you focus more on, when you're curating, focus on people being seen, known, and heard and loved, you then in turn your cup will be filled. And so that's the space that I continuously try to curate from. So
yeah, that's excellent. So I just have a few more questions for you, but one of them is if you wanted to give advice to any creatives who wanted to get involved with Griot and Gray Owl or just the local writing communities in general, what would you tell them?
Yeah, I get asked this question a lot. I mentor a lot now, and I'm so thankful to be able to share my nuggets that I've learned over the years. Let's start with people that just want to get involved, period. I always tell my folks, just pick one thing. I think a lot of people get overwhelmed because they're like, well, I could go to this thing and then I could be publishing and then I need to get my art out there and then I need to showcase it. And it's like, no. Just pick one thing you're going to do. A practice is picking one thing you're going to do consistently. And so that's what I tell people is like, what I'd like for you to do is if you are a writer or a storyteller, I want you to decide on both because both are really important. Your personal daily practice is very important for how you going back to like mining, like how do you mine your craft? So daily practice, what is that going to be? But also, how are you going to step outside your comfort zone and showcase your work? And so I always tell them, pick one thing where you can step outside of your comfort zone and also make yourself feel uncomfortable because that's really important. So that's kind of like the advice I give people. So that can look like an open mic, a slam, showing up to a book signing or a gallery opening and going up to the featured person and talking to them, introducing yourself, telling somebody about what you do, pitching your thing, all of those things that seem scary to an emerging artist or writer, but that also helps them see that their favorite somebody is literally just a human. Also, that there is broader community than you truly know. That's another reason why I want people to show up to these spaces, because I think that they think, especially with writers, there's something about writers that they think it's like this, I need to be in a hole in my room, listen to Mary J. Blige, and I'm just going to sit there and write. And I try to tell people like, no, writing is a collective practice. I think like it's a colonized way of thinking like I need to be like Thoreau in the middle of the woods, creating writing. Like that's not a real thing. So those are the two things that advice I give folks. And the last thing that I tell them is, please know that rejection comes with all of that. Is like the more you share and get out there, rejection is inevitable, but beauty is on the other side of rejection. And so don't stop doing the thing just because someone's saying no or it's not for me is inevitable. Know that on the other side of them saying, maybe not, or no, your destiny awaits. Like, you have no idea what happens if you keep persevere. I am a
Mm-hmm.
living testament of what happens when you persevere past the no. So that's what I try to share with people.
Yeah. I think that's such great advice, especially when you think of just putting yourself out there. I've been following you on Threads at least a year.
Really?
Probably more than that. Yeah, for a while. Just because we're both in Durham and like
Yeah.
in the art scene. But I've been seeing your posts for a while. I definitely saw them last year. And I was just like, oh, like I get a little hung up on titles. So like, oh, I'm not really a writer. I don't know if that's really a space for me.
Yeah.
But this year I was like, you know what? I'm going to put myself out there. Like, let me ask. And here we are.
I'm so glad you did.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's been so great to meet you.
Me too.
And so I'm really excited to participate in the Griot and Gray Owl conference this year. And I'm really happy to have you on the podcast today.
Absolutely. I can't wait for you to come. It's going to be so great.
Thank you. So as my last question, I know you have things you'd like to promote. So tell me about all the details for the conference and anything else you have coming up.
Yes. Okay. So conference details. So to your point, the festival and the conference is not just for writers. So I hope if nobody takes anything else away from this conversation, they take away that all people are welcome, that enjoy storytelling, that enjoy cultural conversations, that enjoy food, gatherings of like-minded people. So that's really what it is. It's a love gathering of 3 days. It's Friday, November 7th. That starts at 3 o'clock with a Gullah Geechee Foundation conversation. So we're so excited to talk about the legacies and literatures of Gullah Geechee people. And then we're going to have this bomb open ceremony with Crystal Wilkinson, Nina, and Pierce Freelon. Oh my goodness, I'm so excited. They're going to be in conversation. There's going to be music and then an opening reading. And then for the rest of the weekend, it's panels, workshops, gatherings, talks, meals, and just like so much fun for all people. And if you're like, I don't really care about writing or cultural conversations, there's also a book fair. So like, now more than ever, we need to be patroning Black books and especially Black banned books. This is Black Banned Book Week. And so we need to be making sure that we're, supporting our local Black authors. But as you said, this is a regional festival. So there will be authors represented from all over the Southeast, someone new, like learn about a new author that you may have never heard of before. So that's really what the weekend is it's a cultural turn up. We're going to have fun. We're going to turn up. So that's November 7th, starting at the Durham Public Library November 7th. And then the rest of the days are at the American Underground on November 8th. And then on the 9th, we're at the Durham Bottling Co. So you can go to griotandgrayowl.org for all of the information and the schedule and the speakers for the weekend.
So, awesome. Yeah. Thank you so much. And today's challenge is to visit griotandgrayowl.org to get more details, check it out, and just learn more about the event and share it with all your friends. Be sure to like, follow, and subscribe to this podcast wherever you listen, and make sure to look us up on Substack to see related writings tied to this podcast. Have a good one.
Bye.